And you've just heard Lost Soul, Brain's Redemption from California Scheming, which is taken from the EP Lost Soul, and it's a collaboration between Syllable and VULIN. And I'm joined by VULIN now, aka Craig McLeod. Hello, Craig.
How's it going?
Really good. Really good. First of all, give us some background to the track and the EP. How did you come to work with Syllable?
Yeah, sure. So Billy and I actually were I've known Billy, we're both from Arbroath originally. I've known Billy since I was, I think probably about 7 or 8.
Right, wow.
And yeah, and his younger brother, and at the time there was no music. So his younger brother, I played in a football team. I think it was Lads Club. There was basically two teams in Arbroath at the time, but basically under eights boys or something. And so Gary, who's Billy's younger brother, is was also my best man, is probably one of my oldest friends. And so when I'd go around there to play or hang out, Billy was the oldest brother. There was three brothers, Gary, Sean, and Billy, and a cousin as well, Robbie, who I also used to make some music with as well in Dead Fiction. They all lived together in the house with the mum. And so that was how I met them. My granddad actually used to run a kind of coach and then started running football teams, and he'd done so in the past. And Billy actually ended up, I think, for a couple of sessions, actually coached
Right.
me, a boy as well. So it's kind of funny. And then, really, as we kind of got older, say like mid teens, late teens, and started hanging out and partying together as you do in skating, and that scene around the kind of late 90s, early 2000s was a big skate scene.
Yeah.
We started hanging out in roughly the same circles, at parties, and then it happened where Billy and Gav got signed to Sony. So obviously we back in our both knew that the whole story, that they'd went to this what do you call it, like a A&R showcase wrapped in Scottish, and the film highlights this kind of perfectly, that they got laughed off and were called the Scottish Proclaimers. And then that they came back and decided, and I think again it was Gav, I think the film shows us, that he decided that no, I won't swear, but screw these guys. Let's redo it in American accents. Let's send it to them and let's see what happens. And then we could try and, as the plan was, which never happened, was like show the issues with authenticity or opportunities or how fake it can be. And that's what was meant to happen when they were on MTV. That was meant to be the opportunity when they came out and
Yeah.
said live on MTV, we're actually Scottish, which obviously never happened. But
Yeah.
so yeah, pretty surreal. And so Billy, we'd see him, I would obviously, they moved to London, and then occasionally, maybe twice a year, we'd come back, and then I would catch up at parties, and yeah, it was pretty wild.
So, for those of people that don't know, this is the story that James McAvoy recently made in a big, his debut feature, directorial feature anyway, which people can catch. But I first came across this, there was a documentary about it.
That's right. Yeah, there was the Great Hip Hop Hoax, which was maybe like a decade or slightly more before. Yeah.
Yeah. If people get the chance to see that, I presume it's probably quite easy to catch up with. It is amazing. So, this
It's
track,
actually on Netflix. Just sorry to interrupt you, Ali.
oh,
Yeah, it was on BBC iPlayer for a long time, and now that the Great Hip Hop Hoax is available on Netflix.
oh, fantastic. Well, I do recommend it. It's unbelievable. And it's particularly unbelievable, I guess, for folk like you who knew all along what the situation was.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Uh, I mean, well, the one thing as well that I never really thought about at the time, was lucky to go see the premiere in Dundee at the DCA, and I never really thought about it because the film is actually amazing. Like all the actors, James, they've done an amazing job, and I didn't really think about that, probably because Billy's sitting there with his family, and it was kind of emotional, but also totally surreal. It's like a
Mm.
Hollywood film to some extent about a pal and the crazy story that it was. But I think it was my wife that said to me, she was like, what it doesn't get across is like that was actually 3 years. They lived down there and pretended to be American for 3 years,
Yeah.
which it probably doesn't when I thought about it. Which is crazy, like even pretending when they came back, or like I think Senga, which is Billy's mum, went and saw Billy, and they didn't break character. They were
Yeah.
constantly talking in American.
Yeah, that's really going to mess with your head, isn't it? That's a terrible.
Well, I mean, absolutely, yeah, yeah.
So, in terms of the EP, how did is it on the soundtrack of the album, or is it this Lost Soul, or is it purely a separate thing?
That's it. I guess the story of how it started was that Billy, the film had been picked up. Sorry, the idea and the story, like Gav's autobiography or the story about it, California Scheming, had been picked up and then dropped over the years. And so Billy had messaged me to say, "Did you hear that James McAvoy's interested?" Obviously, like, man, that's amazing. And eventually, yeah, it was like, no, it's concrete, it's going to happen. And then he phoned me up to say, would you like to make music together again? So I never really mentioned this, but at the time after this kind of happened or was going on, Billy and I were also making some music. I was studying at Perth, and we were just making some tunes together, and catching up and kind of hanging out. And so we'd all had a history of making tracks together. And so yeah, he'd phoned me to say, and was a big fan of VULIN, especially like Distorted Silence. So
Hmm.
basically got in touch to say, do you think we could make some tracks to submit to the film to see if they use them?
Right.
So yeah, so we Arc, which is obviously a single that you I think are going to play, and is off Kirk Road album. Billy loved that and thought that the lyrically it fit well with the kind of idea of the story, and so we did a reversion of that, and that was the first one. And then and then because he really liked Distorted Silence, I suggested to him, man, why don't you put a rap or verse on the end of this? And he was quite hesitant to, but yeah, I think he did a great job, totally smashed it. And again, it is quite cinematic and it's quite uplifting. There's lots of strings. It's very Scottishy,
Yeah.
so we kind of thought that might be a interesting full circle moment where you have this film about, Scottish guys pretending to be American, and now he's rapping on a very Scottish folk anthemic indie rock kind of type track. And so that's the ones we submitted, and James, they loved them. That was the good thing about it. So we were sure that they were going to be used in the film, but I think when it came to the final choice of production, all the tracks that used are like era appropriate
Right.
2000s hip hop. So I totally understand why they never used those tracks. It makes sense. And so they never used those tracks, but the track that when Billy wrote have you seen the film yourself?
No, I haven't seen it
No,
yet.
no, yeah, yeah, cool. I think it's available now on streaming services,
Right.
it's out cinemas and available on streaming services. The final the final scene of the film is Gav, hence why Billy called it the Lost Soul tracks, like Brains' Redemption. So Billy wrote this monologue for the film, and it's Gav rapping, or sort of rapping, but more of a monologue, like back in Dundee, or it's meant to be somewhere in Dundee on a stage, and he's doing it to Mary and Billy, and it's sort of his apology to some extent, you know.
Right.
James was like, "Where is this track? Like, how? Like, we got to use this track. This is amazing." And so Billy was like, phoned me and said, "Man, he loves this track. There's no track. Can we make a track for the monologue that I wrote?" And that was how Lost Soul then came about, which is pretty
Yeah,
cool.
oh, fantastic. And actually, the EP works as a little look back to previous times with Distorted Silence. You said there's a remix of that, but also Arc, which we are going to hear the album version because that's on your new album,
That's
uh,
right. Yeah.
which is Kirk Road, and it's
Yeah.
going to be coming out in late July.
That's right. Yeah, it'll be out on the 31st of July.
So, can you tell us a bit about the album?
Yeah, sure. Um, so the what do I say? Um, the idea for the album, like the concept for the album, I've played in a lot of bands over the last like 20 plus years, made a lot of records in studios or small house studios, and was quite inspired by some bands I was listening to that were making records in real spaces. It's like I think at the time I saw Manchester Orchestra I saw a documentary of them recording in a church, and then Pinegrove record came out and they were making it all themselves in this big house. So moving away from dead spaces, like treated studios. And I just thought that'd be an interesting thing. I've not really done that. And so that was the plan for the EP that I actually released during lockdown, who had a lot of collaborators on it. But obviously, as we talked about pre this interview, yeah, lockdown changed all that. And so, like, getting people like Louis Abbott or Graham Smiley or Sean, who I actually played with, and Dante, who's now the Wind Up Crows, everyone ended up recording in their own little studios, sending it to me, and then mixed and mastered, and it got done that way. But the concept for that, the start of VULIN, because that was my first
Yeah.
music release, was always going to be to try and do it in a real space. And so after COVID happened, and then I've had a wee girl since then, and things settled down, I managed to get access to where I live in Fowles. There's a wee kirk just across the road from me. There's actually been a kirk there from the 1100s.
Wow.
And this version of it has been around from like the 14th century. It's really gorgeous. I think BBC had done I haven't seen this,
Mhm.
but when I mentioned it to them, they said that they'd seen this BBC documentary. Um, it was about the art that's inside. So I think originally the whole walls of the kirk would have been covered in these wooden, I think Oakham boards
Right.
on, like the whole inside would have been like murals. And so
Mhm.
what they've kept and then framed is some artworks from it. And so I think it's a one of a kind. I think it's maybe like the only pre-Reformation artwork of the crucifixion that hadn't been completely trashed. Which is
John Knox and his pals.
well, exactly. Yeah, yeah, having a Rami. Yeah, exactly. And so well, I remember the first time going in there and seeing, I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous. It's massive. There was other bits of artwork where, for instance, like, I mean, now I know, but the heads of, say, the saints had been rubbed out. It looked like someone had just like, white spirited the heads off, and it was cut. And they've got these hanging in there. They're covered in holes. I was
Right.
thinking, oh, that's such a shame, and I wonder what happened. And then eventually, after being in there so long and meeting the wee minister, she was really lovely. She's retired now. She told me the story. Of course, this is what happened. They were driving these big like 6-inch nails into them, torching them, rubbing out the saints' heads, trying to, I guess, rewrite history.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Yeah.
fascinating. Fascinating.
It sounds like a brilliant place to visit.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, well, this is it. So now Church of Scotland are actually they've been trying. So the local community, Church of Scotland, much like many of the properties, they're trying to sell them. Because I think it was only this is the reason I managed to get the keys. They literally just gave me the keys, which was
And yeah.
unreal. Because they only use it like the first Sunday of the month or something. But the local community now have started a trust and they're in the process of taking over it. But the issue is that I think it's Church Scotland want to take the artwork. But they're like, well, then without it, it's just an empty kirk. It loses the significance of it. So that's kind of ongoing. But yeah, so in terms of the Kirk Road album, that was in a nutshell. Um, the idea was to make a record in a real space. Try and not use any digital reverbs, fake reverbs. Use the real space. Use lots of room mics to capture that. And then tie it to, I guess, lyrically. It's about me getting on, starting a family in Fowlis, having a daughter, um, and then it made it even more special getting to record it in a wee kirk that I can literally see from my studio here. It's pretty cool.
I mean, you can tell it's a very personal record in the ways that you've mentioned. It is a gorgeous record. The sound,
Thanks,
you
man.
know, um, it really comes across and it's being played in a kind of real space, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Did
yeah.
you have other musicians in there with it? Was it recorded? I mean, how was it recorded?
Yeah, yeah. So it was actually good advice from when I worked at Perth. An engineer said you'd maybe be worth testing it first to see if it's like too wet, like if it would be
Right.
too washy, too much of a big space. So myself, and guys that I was in Dante with Sean McLaughlin at the time, Rudy Kidd and Stuart Hoskin, there was the drummer and the bass player. We got together, one mic in the room and played some of the songs that I'd been working on, and then listened back, and thought, no, it's working, it's actually got a really nice reverb. This is kind of geeky, but I think I kind of the church is like 8 meters by 24, and so
Right.
I created an impulse response of it to then see how long, and I think the reverb is like the tail's about 3 seconds, as like an echo. So yeah, kind of perfect. It really did work. So in terms of building it from there, yeah, just as typical records, I made lots of demos in my house in this studio, and then we tracked it. So drums, bass, then I did all the guitars, organ. We used the real pipe organ in there as well, which is really amazing. It's a small pipe organ, and all the pipes are on the side, um, which again just added to I guess the vibe of the record, the authenticity of it. And yeah, so no, lots of people on the record. Jody Nicholson, who sang on the record. As I already mentioned, Rudy Kidd on the drums, Stuart Hoskin on the bass, myself on guitars and acoustics, nylon. I played some piano on it. I played organ. Also, my good mate Andy Dowson played organ and piano as well. Um, Gav Spirit played trumpet. Ewan McLaughlin, who's in Valtos or and Dance Dub, he played fiddle. He played on the last record as well. Amazing. And the track Arc, you can hear his big fiddle solo at the end. It's
Yeah.
phenomenal. You know, he's such a great player. And Chris Mara also played pedal steel, who is um, Michael Mara's brother.
Right. Oh, wow.
Yeah, great, amazing pedal steel player. And I think he, for a time, played in Danny Wilson as well with Gary Clark.
Right. Um, yeah, you can hear all of those instruments. You know, it's just that it's so well mixed as a record. Which I kind of thought, without knowing what I'm talking about, really might have been quite difficult because of where it was recorded to get each instrument as clear as it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I appreciate that. Thanks. It definitely was a. I mean, do you know what? I almost think as well that was maybe the one good thing about it. Maybe why it did feel cohesive, is that everything was recorded in the one space, with the same mics, with the same gear, with the same distances. So like, I think naturally maybe because it was in that one space, it did have like a natural cohesive kind of glue to it. Whereas that's something that you say you do make records in a bunch of different studios, something that can happen or that you have to work hard at is trying to get those instruments in the same space. Whereas I guess naturally that kind of came together. But it was a long process. I mean, it was slow burn. I wasn't rushing this at all, but it was probably over about 4 years to logistically to get in, get musicians, record it, mix it, and so yeah, so a lot of time was spent for sure getting it as good as I possibly could get it, you know, man.
But I'm going to assume that you're happy with the results of this and the album.
I am, yeah, no, I'm definitely proud of it. Yeah. It's one of those, yeah, it's a strange thing finishing a record the thing as well, I ended up putting it off because Andy that I'd mentioned, who played piano and organ, I actually he sort of got me into music or taught me drums. He was in my Reggie class in sixth year.
Right.
And that was my kind of way in. And then me and him actually moved to Australia. We studied music out in Oz. We came back, we played in bands, went separate ways. He went and studied at London, Westminster. I stayed in Scotland. And so we'd only ever see each other rarely. And then he actually got with a partner from school in Edinburgh, and they've had a kid. And so Andy's moved back up into the old house out by Colliston and Angus where we first got together. And
Wow.
we've made another EP which is called it'll be called Mill Sessions, which is actually it's one of the reasons that I called VULIN is because it's an old Scots word meaning mill, and that the house that I kind of started that musical journey, there's like an old dilapidated mill outside the music room window. So it's this strange full. I actually, when we first got together, I think we'd been playing together for months, and then I was like, man, I totally forgot to mention like why I called VULIN, you know. So it's kind of yeah, it's kind of special in a way that so anyway I'd put because of Billy, so like you know just trying to work, get obviously try to be a good dad and other interests, you know. It definitely, I never wanted the record to be rushed, but then when the opportunity came around to work on the film with Billy, and then Andy was going to have a kid, it was like, all right man, let's ramp this up. And so I
Yeah.
actually put the record on hold and then made these other records at the same time. So, but no, now that it's all done, it's yeah, it's a weird one. It's not like I listen to them anymore. You know, it's a funny thing when because I've listened to them a million times making them.
Sure.
It would be nice maybe next year to go back with fresh ears, so to speak. I'm definitely proud of them. You know, the record means a lot to me for sure. So
It sounds as we're talking, there's a lot of journeys and return journeys and people coming back from, and meetings again after, people going off and doing their own thing. It's nice. That story kind of adds a lot of warmth to the record itself. Do you have plans to do anything live?
yeah, so that unfortunately I'd actually well, so I was going to play Arbroath again because I'm from Arbroath. Andy Mack, a friend of mine's been running this new festival, which I think this year's got Idlewild. It's got a lot of big brown bears playing the acoustic stage. I was actually going to play that. It would have been the day after the record comes out, and that would have been pretty good. But I'm actually going to be in Spain on a climbing trip, and I kind of I didn't I realize like it just won't be enough time by the time I get back on the ferry to get home to do it. So I'm not going to do that. But the plan will be, I've actually been playing with Andy. Again, things are on hold at the moment, but myself and him have been doing a stripped back acoustic versions of our tracks and the Kirk Road.
Mhm.
And we played a bit last year, but that'll probably be the plan. Maybe after summer, and I start working on the promo for that Mill Sessions EP, then I think we'll get out and start gigging, you know. So I don't have anything booked just now, but it's been a very busy like year working on all this stuff, man. So I'm quite enjoying not. And to be fair as well, like I probably am going to try and push it. You know, the goal of making these records is definitely I love songwriting. I
Yeah.
love making records. I've done a lot of gigs over many years,
Yeah.
and now especially with having a daughter and other hobbies and interests, definitely gigging live a lot. It definitely takes a lot of time, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to push. I mean,
Yeah.
doing this kind of stuff and getting this kind of thing with you is amazing, I want to get the record out there as good as I can. But I don't really have my goals aren't to try and make it huge or to toil relentlessly and make it my job. I'm doing it for its own sake. You know, that's yeah.
It's really interesting. I spoke to Adam Ross recently,
Oh
and
yeah,
he was saying, he's got a new album out, and that's exactly what you've just said. I love making music, I love making records, and all that. Just, but then I've almost got to gird myself for a kind of campaign to push it, and stuff that he really doesn't want to do. He
yeah,
would quite happily admit it. And the
yeah.
other thing,
Sure.
which you were saying is, I'm reading a biography at the moment of Talk Talk by Graham Thompson, and they just stopped. Well, it was Mark Hollis who just went, "We're not touring." After I think the second Colour Spring album, so we're done with touring.
Right. Yeah.
And then they were kind of done with making singles and doing anything that was kind of what record companies might want. They did it their own way, and there's something quite admirable about that, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well. Yeah, I totally understand why people try and play the game, and I guess maybe on every level. I mean, it definitely crossed my mind, once doing it. And I know other people that are in a similar position, as you've said there as well, who love the writing part, do it for its own sake, but also see that it would be silly for it to live on a drive somewhere or to never go out because I mean, I love hearing new records or talking about music. And it's the same as yourself and same as books, isn't it? It's like
Yeah.
you can write a book and never publish it, but then I guess part of that is about communication and maybe inspiring someone or connecting with someone. So yeah, this is definitely I definitely find it conflicting to do all the and it's I mean I'm to do all the social media and stuff and
Yeah.
I do the bits that I feel like it's probably nice little bits of content, but I don't want to film myself on social media. I don't want to all the Spotify playlists. I don't want to spend hundreds of pounds on it and stuff because yeah, it's I don't know. Yeah, I'm definitely conflicted about it.
Yeah. Well,
For
I mean,
sure.
what you do, I guess, whether it's writing books or making music or whatever, it's storytelling, and stories are meant to be told. That's the kind of whole point of them, I think, and
That's a good
shared.
point.
And so I think you're right. Instead of just writing it and thinking, "Oh, isn't that great?" I think it's part of the process, is at least to let other people hear it.
Yeah, yeah, no, man, I think that's a really good way to put it. Yeah, absolutely. And also as well, in some ways, it's then nice to let it go.
Yeah,
Because try to decide when is it finished. And actually then once it's done and getting it out there, it does feel good. And then ultimately when you feel motivated, you can move on to the next
yeah.
writing, for sure.
So we're going to hear a track from the album now, and it's Arc, which we mentioned. What can you tell us about Arc before we hear it?
Yeah, what to tell you about it? So this is probably one of the like the most epic, I guess, sounding, and I think that's definitely down to Ewan McLaughlin. The fiddle at the end, which it's the same as almost Chris Mara when they came to do the sessions. I'm definitely not as good as them when it comes to this kind of stuff. That it was done so quickly, like let me hear it, and they'd already maybe written some demos, and I was like, well, we listen back to the demos. No, no, it's okay. I think and within one or two takes, that's how good their musicianship is, and ideas, and it just blew me away. Both like listen to the cans as he's playing, and so. Yeah, I think massive thanks to everyone that played on that record. That is or that track. So it's not everyone that I'd mentioned. It's Jody and myself singing, Ewan on fiddle, Andy on piano and organ, and Stuart and Rory on drums and bass. The track itself is kind of maybe cryptic in some way, but maybe slightly about dealing with introspection and kind of rumination. But again, I've kind of wrote it in a way that I never want those things to be super apparent. Like I don't want them to be. like a diary style writing, like
Yeah.
self-conscious. I wanted it to maybe have a bit more depth to it. So it's not something I would normally say about what the lyrics are about, but I think that's interestingly why it resonated with Billy, that he thought it was maybe this idea of a relationship between people, and that's why it worked so well for the film. But actually, it was nothing about that. So
Yeah.
but yeah, and also as well, what you hear at the start of the track as well is the low organ pedal, which was fantastic to record.
Fantastic. Craig, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me, and all the best with the album.
Amazing. Thanks a lot, Ali. I really appreciate your time. Cheers.
And this is VULIN and ARC.